The content of this video, as well as the thoughts, views, and opinions expressed herein, belong to the presenter and do not necessarily reflect the views of Brigham Young University or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I want to introduce I have a couple of friends here, but I'm introducing them for a specific reason. It's Christopher right over here, my son. Stand up, Christopher. That's okay. Yes, there's Christopher. And Landon, where's Landon? There's the son. There's my wife right next to him. That's Mary. But I wanted to tell you this about Christopher. There was a time down here at BYU that we came to the end of the week and I introduced my family because I'd been talking about my family the whole time that I was here. And so I just thought it'd be so fun to introduce them. And I got Christopher and I lined them all up. And of course, Christopher at the time was 8 years old. You know, they may be here, whatever. And lined them all up and said the thing. And we laughed and had a great time and everybody clapped for them. And as he was walking out the door with my wife, he looked up at my wife and said, "What in the world could Dad ever say that many people would ever want to listen to?" So I want you to know that there are those that Heavenly Father sent to me to make sure that it all remains very, very kind of just, that's the way things are. I'm so happy that you're here. How many of you are from California? Wow. What do you think, huh? How many from Southern California? Earthquake and rain, huh? What? Not that much? Yeah, that's why you're here. You're going to let that place go. I think you have to be very smart. I think they did think that it will have a little bit of an impact because there are some people that are slightly concerned about the way things are working, and we certainly send our prayers to them. Okay, what we're going to do is this. We've been teaching things like this for a long time, but I have to tell you this. I'm proud of you for being here because I think, and I'll show you why it is that so much of this, you know, one of my good clients walked up and, no, it wasn't. It was a missionary from our mission field, walked up and said, "Well, I'm here, but Sister blank is not here." And so I started to chide him. And he said, "Well, she went to spiritual things." Yeah, I'll let you make the guess by the time it gets done. Is there any kind of spirituality? You know, it does say in Doctrine and Covenants 29 that it says to the Lord, all things are spiritual, right? There's no such thing as secular and spiritual and all that kind of stuff. They're all spiritual. Could it be possible that somehow prosperity and the way that we handle our financial resources could be a spiritual class to attend? We'll see if some of that comes out by the time we get through with all this. Yeah, guys have to just know that whenever you give a presentation in tax or finance or real estate or anything else, you have to always tell people, don't believe anything you hear and don't listen unless somebody's giving it to you for personal reasons or something like that. There's the two sons that are here. That's very nice. Let me just tell you this. I'm going to try to get through. My wife, when I first got here, said, "Did you take my advice and cut down the number of slides that you have in your presentation?" I have a reputation, and it's very secure, that I always add a number of slides just before each time. And yesterday, I was adding slides to this. So we're going to move along quite quickly. Don't try to take very copious notes, or you'll be very frustrated, discouraged. But I'll show you a place that I'll help you get some notes on it afterwards. So nevertheless, I just want you to know this, that I believe that in tax law, there's certain things, there's certain parts of tax law that really does give you the opportunity to create prosperity based upon the way you handle financial resources. In this class, though, we're going to handle two of them. We're going to talk about retirement planning and charitable giving. And I think you're going to find some very unique things. There was a tax law created in 2017. Some of you might remember it. In that tax law, they doubled the standard deduction. Do you remember that? They made it so the standard deduction was twice as high. And since that point in time, most members of the church, we do something here that's very unique. We give an outsized portion of our income to charity. Did you know that? Across the rest of the country, the average taxpayer in America today only gives 0.5% of their income to charity. For some reason, out here in Utah and Idaho and Nevada and Arizona and California, that kind of stuff, we have a lot of people who give 10% or more to their income to charity on a regular basis. And I will tell you this, and I might weep as I tell you that one of the greatest gifts of my life has been dealing with so many of these donor advised funds and dealing with members of the church that really give. I had one member last year that I think his income was about $300,000. He'd already given $72,000 in tithing. He called me up one day and said, "Scott, I need to give another 72." Now, as his financial advisor, now just understand this. I've always said that I'm going to spend my eternities on the rock piles of purgatory because I say some things to people like that, like this. I said, that seems to be higher than a kind of the percentage that we would normally expect under this circumstance for somebody to give. Have you actually done the numbers? You know what I'm saying? I know right now some of you are going, oh my, let's get out of here. This guy. So I just said, have you done the numbers? And he said, he said this, I have. And he said, all I know is it seems like the Lord is looking for more ways to bless me. And so I want to find new ways. So he wanted to give another 72. And I said, okay. You know how many times somebody will go, I have so many good clients that are just, they just give so much. And every time they call, I'm tempted to say, did you do the number? Okay, so we'll show you how it works. I want you to know that really, now see, a lot of people have convinced you that there's not a lot of ways you can still save taxes in the world today. There really are. This book that we've written, defines a number of different ways, the 10 most profitable strategies. We've got all these things lined up. So you can see why I'm rolling through it quickly, because we have to do the time. But so we're going to talk about grouping charitable contributions and a retirement. This was the major message at Education Week last year. It's the first time we ever taught it last year. We had people throughout the week come back to me going, can you explain that to me once? How many of you were here last year at Education Week in this same class? Yeah, so a lot of you have not heard this. I hope you can see why it just became such a trigger. Everybody wanted to learn more about it, because we as members, I believe that 95% of the members of the church today are not getting a tax benefit out of the charitable contributions that they're paying. How's that? So they get the emotional benefit and they might get the spiritual benefit out of them. But we'd like to see if there's some way that we can actually get the tax benefit out of the charitable contributions that you're making. Do you see what I mean? And I'll show you in just a second why that's the case. So let's do this. We'll get right into it so that you'll learn real quickly exactly what we're talking about. We're going to take an individual in 2023. This is his adjusted gross income, 100. Now, my son always reminds me, caution people, just if your income is not this high, does that mean you won't benefit from it? Man, you just have to know, I've had people with $50,000 and $60,000 incomes that still wrote off a lot of and saved a lot of taxes. So let's just see if this would work for you. So here's a guy, $150,000. His standard or itemized deduction this year is $27,700. His taxable income will be $122,300. So his tax will be $17,521. All right, very straightforward. Now, here were his itemized deductions. His state income tax that he paid was $5,500. His property tax was $4,100, and his charitable contributions were $15,000. So 10% of his income he paid. In this case, it was tithing. So I can say that here. I have to always be very careful when I'm teaching this in audiences that might not be tithing that they're doing, but other charitable contributions. So can you see, though, if that's the case, then his total itemized deductions will be $24,600. Which deduction does he take? Does he take the $24,600 or does he take the $27,700? 27 cents. So he takes a standard deduction. Do you see that? Do you all see then? This is the first educational rendezvous. This is the first point that if your spouse is sleeping already, you poke them in the ribs and say, make sure you get this point because it's important to understand. Do you see what I mean when I say you got no tax benefit for paying your tithing? Do you all see that? If I'd have paid $1 in tithing, if I'd have paid $15,000 in tithing, I'd still take that exact same standard deduction of $27,700. Does that seem obvious to everybody? You got to see that, because then as we go on to the rest of it, you'll see very quickly. So let's just take him out over the next 4 years. So here's 24, and I didn't factor in inflation. I didn't do cost of living adjustments or anything, because I just wanted to keep it very simple. Now, do you all see that if he stays doing the exact same thing, if he pays his tithing the same way and he pays his taxes the same way, he'll never get any benefit for paying any tax benefit for paying his charitable contributions. Do y'all see that? Go like this. Periodically, it's a kind of a good thing, kind of a good exercise to stay awake anyway, so I'll never get that. And look, there's his $15,000 that he pays every year and he never gets any tax benefit from it. What we're going to do is make it so that we shift all those $15,000 contributions into one account. And then now we take an itemized deduction of $84,600. Can you see how big of a difference? Boy, that's going to drive me crazy. That's just got that whistle in it. I'll try to get down a little bit. Okay, do you all see that? Are you all with us so far? We're just going to take all those charitable contributions for the future. Now, see, a lot of you guys have been doing that doubling deduction kind of thing. You've been doing it for a number of years, but now you're going to do not just 1 year, a double year. We're going to take deductions from a number of years, and we're going to put them together all in the same year. We're going to deduct the whole thing for tax purposes, and we're going to generate a very sizable tax deductions that are real. It's real money. It's in your pocket. It's not like it's some kind of it might happen if the ghosts from Tax Hollow wake up and give you that benefit. This is real deductions that you get. Let's do this. Here's how we do it. We do it inside of a donor advice fund. A donor advice fund is just this. Somebody that's got the donor advice fund makes a contribution to the donor advice fund. Once it gets into the donor advice fund, what is that fund? Just kind of think for a second. What is that fund? We might have somebody that has a brokerage account or a savings account or something like that. They got a couple $100,000 in it, $200,000 or $300,000 or something like that. And just as a suggestion, I say, let's just take $100,000 out of that and shift it over to another account. See, that's all they're doing is just shifting it to another account. By shifting it to that other account, they get to deduct the whole thing that year for tax purposes. A lot of our clients like it when they can, then they put it into investments. They think that, hey, look, if I'm going to use it for charitable contributions, they love to have low volatility investments. You're all aware today that federal treasury securities, you can get 5.5%, almost 6%. Federal agency bonds, you can get over 6%. For the time being, we don't know how long that's going to last. That's a pretty dang safe rate of return. But you get this big tax deduction in the year that you make that shift in the investment. You see that? So now you're going to get the big tax deduction when you make that shift, and the money remains in the donor advice fund. It can be managed. You can invest it in anything you want to invest it in, and it remains inside the donor advice fund. Now catch this. This is kind of fascinating. You never have to make any kind of a distribution from the donor advice fund. We have a number of clients that are actually building up a sizable donor advice fund that they want to leave for their family at the time of their death, and they're getting tax deductions during their lifetime. They just want to set it up as a family legacy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But just know this, that you don't have to ever make any kind of a distribution. You can decide when it goes out, who it goes to, and you can decide exactly how much has to go out. And you can even have other people team up with you to help you make the decisions. And so it's a fairly flexible account, and makes it so that you're just setting aside the money. I don't know how about you guys. If you paid your tithing this year, I think there's a good chance that some of you have the enthusiasm for doing it in future years. Don't raise your hand. That's just kind of a thought-provoking kind of a comment that you actually think that you might be doing in other years. If you're going to be doing it in other years anyway, if you can just kind of isolate some money right now that you set aside and say, that's what I'm going to make those contributions out of, then you can do the whole thing for. So let me give you a couple of illustrations. Here's client number one. In this one, he has adjusted gross income of 230. Remember, you don't have to have 230. I only put that up there as an illustration. So 230 has itemized deductions of 24,300. He has a standard deduction of 27,700. Into a donor advice fund, he places $100,000 in cash. I love that part because I can show you a $100,000 bill. And I know that's the first time you've ever seen one because they're not in circulation anymore. So you can go on Google and see a copy of it if you like that. So in that, he puts $100,000. What happens? He saves $29,000 in taxes. That's a real saving. That's tax savings. You don't. Now I'm going to show you how to turn those into $1 million choices. Those who've been in our classes before know what $1 million choice is. I'm going to show you how to turn that into $1 million choice. But for right now, just know that's $29,000. It just came out of nowhere that you would not get in any other way if you continue to pay your tithing and your taxes in the exact same way. Do you see that? Okay, so and there's the income tax assumptions that we've made for that. Of course, you always got to put that kind of a qualifier on and say that they may vary based on the position. But here's number two. Here's client number two. Client number two, instead of putting cash inside he's going to put appreciated stock because I can't tell you the client's name and the stock that he bought. I just put one rich guy and it's Pipe Dream Inc. But he bought 10,000 shares. But I will tell you this, he spent $20,000 and the stock's now worth 80. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Now we're talking about an appreciated asset. What would that do inside of one of these funds? So adjusted gross income of 230, same thing as we had on the last one. And the donor advice fund, he puts $100,000 in Pipe Dream stock. But watch this. His basis, what he originally paid for it, was $20,000. Because his basis was 20, if he just sold it right now, how much would he report for tax purposes as a capital gain? He reported $80,000. Because inside of a donor advice fund, there's no reporting of a capital gain at all. So the tax savings on the capital gain is the 20% capital gains tax plus the state income tax of 5%. So 25% of $80,000 is what? $20,000. He saves $20,000 in taxes. Do you see that? It's so fun to watch your faces because some of you are going, yeah. And some of you are going, I swear, if any of you are going, want to try to kind of ask a question, I don't know. I don't know if that's good or not. Question. In the value of the stock, he bought the stock for $20,000 The stock is now worth $100,000. That's an $80,000. So if he took it out and sold it without doing it inside of a donor advised fund, he'd have to report $80,000 for tax purposes, $80,000 in capital gains. But because it's inside of a donor advised funds, he does not have to report that 80. Yeah, that's exactly right. Wait till you see some of the other really, really, really fun things you can put inside of a donor advised fund. I'm trying to figure out a way to put one of my kids in. I don't know that I'm at the court of loss. So, oh, don't you love people that ask a question that segues into your next piece so well? I paid, you don't know how much I paid that guy to ask that question right there. I will tell you that, I'll tell you what it is, so he'll know. Let me just tell you this. I always told my students here at BYU, there's 3 types of questions. One, that I think everyone should hear the answer to, that I'm going to answer right now. That's one. That's the number 1 question. Number 2 is, it's a great question, but it's coming up. Can you just hang on? Number 3 is, it's a great question, but not for everybody, so come up after class. You know what I'm saying? But he asked the perfect number 1. Watch this. I'm going to answer. So he said, well, if you put $100,000 into it, why doesn't he get that other deduction that you talked about, the other guy did? And the answer is, he actually does. He gets a full fair market value deduction for the investment that he's put inside that donor advised fund. He gets 2 different tax savings. Do you see that? So he saves because he doesn't have to pay the capital gains tax. And now he saves because the IRS will allow him to report the full fair market value of that stock on his tax return as a charitable contribution. That's a great question. You should come to the front row. I love people in the front row. Let me ask you this one, and just know this. I think if we don't roll along fast, but go ahead.
I think some of these people might have the same thought. Okay, so say you front load 5 years of tithing into one of these.
You front load 5 years of tithing into one of these.
And then each year you can just pay your tithing out of that.
Yes.
But you get your tax deduction that 1 year.
Just on the first year. But what do you get every other single year? The standard deduction. So you get the exact same thing you're already getting.
Yeah.
So you just load it up. And in this case, you save a total of $49,000 in taxes. That's actually money that you got because you did it the right way. If you have a desire to actually make charitable contributions for a period of time, which I'm assuming that some of you do. Are you that way? That's very good. I don't have a times on the phone I have to tell clients, I'm not the bishop when I'm asking this question. Are you kind of thinking about paying tithing for the rest of your life? So, okay, here we go. So in this case, he says 49. But I'll watch one. Here's one that we created that works so well. What if some guy's got a bunch of money in a 401k? Is there some way they can use that money out of his 401k? Watch what happens. Yeah, he goes, yeah. You watch, yeah, see how this is going to work. So let's assume it's a 401k that's got money in. Got an adjusted gross income, just for illustration purposes, $300,000. Have clients that are much less. You have $300,000 inside of it. An itemized deductions that year was $39,800. The standard deduction was $27,700. We take $350,000 out of his 401k. Well, anybody knows anything about tax just had a heart palpitation because we have to add that to his adjusted gross income. Oh man, that would surely put him in the high tax deduction. But what if we took that money and immediately donated it to a donor advised fund? Then it zeroes out the tax. He pays no tax on pulling all that money outside of that thing. So now his new itemized deduction is $389,000. His net tax on that distribution is 0. This is one that probably more people have gotten excited about. We've actually been asked to speak at places just about this. I had a National Donor Advised Fund call me and asked me to be on their advisory board because of the way we configured this. He pays no tax. He pays 0 tax on all that. So it's a great way. How many of you have ever heard somebody say, do a Roth conversion and all that kind of stuff? We're the ultimate, don't do Roth conversions and don't do Roth contributions. And if you have any questions about that, call me and let me know, because I can just tell you why those are probably misdirected. Well, when you say irrevocable, I think that's a great question, Sister Ryder. So if somebody says, but if I put it inside that donor advised fund, it's irrevocable. Is it irrevocable? The answer is no. It's actually treated a lot like it's in an IRA. So if you pull it out, you'll still have to pay tax on it, and there are some penalties. But I'm assuming this group, probably, if they have good advice or whatever, they're going to factor in all those possibilities, like they truly got the extra money, that kind of stuff. So they'll probably calculate it in such a way that they feel comfortable putting that much inside the donor advised fund. Okay, one more. This is it, and then we got a race.
Are you saying that I pay my tithe from the donor advised fund then? Yeah. If that I get a double tax write-off or what?
Oh, Wait till I get to the end of this and show you $1 million choice on this, and you're going to go, wow, that guy's really got it cooking. So, okay, so that's a 401k. I'm going to race through you guys. So this guy on this thing saved $105,000 in taxes that he would never have saved any other. We can't do any more questions. Is that okay? I know, because I know that we'll never get to. You don't know how many slides I've still got to go to. So just because you're such a great guy, I'm going to let you ask that one question. But after this, we can't do any more questions. Your 401k? Oh, if you want to give all that to a charity up front right now in advance, so you want to give that whole money to the charity right now, you can do the whole thing. That's the same kind of thing. Same thing. I'm sorry. Now, it would be different. That's a complex question, so we better take care of that on a personal basis. So, but yeah, if you want to pay 10 years worth of tithing all at once and just pull it all out of your 401k and drop it in or something like that, you might be interested. There's a lot of folks that I have that are doing required minimum distributions from their 401k and their IRA balances right now. You know how well this works with a required minimum distribution and how many people I have wildly excited about the fact that they can take care of required, because a lot of people don't need the required minimum distribution. They really don't want it. This certainly provides them some wonderful options. Okay, here we go. So we got to go through these a little quick because I have a confidence you guys will get it. There's just so much more I want to do. Number one, what kind of assets can you put inside of a donor advised fund? You guess it's a lot of this based on what we've already talked about: cash, publicly traded circuit. You can see all that stuff. We call those the traditional assets. You'd probably just assume that you could do inside of a donor advised fund by hearing about them. In fact, depending on the kind of donor advised fund you have, everyone will take those kind of deductions. But I'll tell you this, if you do a private donor advised fund, like the one that asked me to serve on their board, let me just tell you this, you can do all sorts of non-traditional assets. I've seen a guitar contributed to a donor advised fund, a coin collection, baseball cards. I love to talk about those because I was one of those guys that sat on the steps of and ate that gum. How many of you ever chewed bubble gum out of a packet of butt? You can feel it right now. In fact, you can almost taste that gum as I talk about it. It's so bad. But you can see all those different kinds of things that you can put. So I hope that you got your pen and you're kind of going, well, what else do I have in my household right now that might be able to be contributed to a donor advised fund? Maximum tax benefits. If it's a cash, your deduction is equal to the contribution. So $100,000. Your deduction is $100,000 equal to the contribution, but it's limited to 60% of your adjusted gross income. So you can't just contribute an unlimited amount. It's really helpful to have the deductions calculated by somebody who really knows what they're doing, just because there's a lot of other factors that have to kind of factor into it. If it's an appreciated asset, you get the two deductions, don't you? You save the capital gains tax, but then you also get to report the full fair market value of the deduction for tax purposes. But in that case, it's limited to 30% of your adjusted gross income. If it's a 401k or an IRA, there's no direct contribution. So you remember how we distributed it and then contributed to a donor advised fund. But if you do it that way, you have a net zero tax on that. Boy, what a great way to pull money out of a 401k. Can you imagine? You put it in, you pay no tax. You grew, you paid no tax. You're pulling it out, you pay no tax. What could be a better tax deduction in life than something like that? If it's an estate asset, I have a number of people that still leave them in their estates. And if it's an estate asset, there's two different taxes that you have to be aware of. First is the estate tax. Probably won't impact the highest majority of you here because there's zero tax on a distribution of up to 12. You can, at the time of your death, can give $12,920,000 this year, pay no estate tax. If you're married, you can give up to $26 million and pay no estate tax. So probably not a great concern. It's going to come back down into 2025 unless Congress does something about it. We'll see how they work with that. But for right now, it's up to $26 million. But there's an income tax. If you leave like an IRA, if you leave an annuity, if you leave like a savings bond or something where the income is taxed as ordinary income when they get it, then your heirs have to pay ordinary income tax on it as they received it. But I'll tell you this, I had a gal who passed away this last year that she had $500,000 in a 401k and an IRA. And she knew about this. So she said, would you just tell my kids about that? So we sat all four of our kids down and showed them exactly what it was. And the kids put their money into a donor advised fund and they paid no tax on the distribution. So they're going to use it to pay their tithing too. So they thought that was kind of a sweet deal. So, okay. So zero income tax too. The investment, what kind of investments can you have once you're inside the donor advised fund? Almost anything, depending on what kind of a fund it is. If it's a sponsoring charity, like if you have the Red Cross or the Habitat for Humanity or UNICEF or any of those kind of things, then they probably will only give you kind of a short list of investments that you can make. If it's a larger national donor advised fund like a Charles Schwab or a Fidelity, then most all investments are possible. But if one of those private donor advised funds like I just talked about, then this is the most comprehensive. I've seen one guy he left the guitar in there for a couple of years. Just didn't sell it. You just left that in there as the investment. So it kind of gives you some more options, some more flexibility if you have that kind of an investment. Distributions or the donations that can be made from it, it can be determined by the donor, the heirs, or their family members. That's why we put a lot of good family members up there. No minimum annual distributions. There's 1.5 million 501c3 entities in America today. So some people say, Scott, I don't know exactly who I want to give it to. So there's ways of setting up through artificial intelligence that can guide you through the process of making sure that it fulfills your values, your expectations, your personal wishes, or whatever. Acceptable donations as long as it goes to a 501c3 entity. And I want you to know this: if it's in one of those private donor advised funds, you can actually give the nonprofit making entities. Now, for anybody that knows tax laws, ever dealt with these before, that should have made you wake up and go, really? I mean, I've seen them given to genealogical organizations and others that are not 501c3 organizations, but they're nonprofits and could be, yeah, I heard somebody go, I hope that a lot of people went, that's kind of cool, huh? Yeah, a lot of places you can donate it to that you could not normally donate it to. So kind of advantageous. They completely go tax-free and determined by the donors and the names of the heirs. No minimum distribution, you get all that. That's where I give you that big caveat again. It's probably best to have somebody help you with it, because there really are a lot of, donor advice funds, but there's also private family foundations, charitable trusts, that kind of thing. So it's kind of nice to make for absolutely certain that it maximizes the tax benefit of as you're doing it, as it reflects not only your wishes, but your obvious desire. How many people here love paying taxes? Do you know that you can give qualified charity donations right now to the federal government and not pay tax on it? What do you think? That you can do that. That's kind of fun. Okay. There's something I want to cover with you real fast. How many of you ever heard Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I remember the first time I heard about the University of Utah. I just loved it. It's just such a good concept, isn't it? That we actually in this lifetime have the first types of needs. We had physiologicals, air, water, food, safety. Somebody in Southern California right now would understand that a little bit better than they probably did at the beginning of the day. For love and belonging, esteem, somebody periodically saying attaboy. And self-actualization. I remember the first time I actually heard self-actualization. I went, that sounds, I wanted to get to the point where I could experience those kind of emotions and those kind of feelings about the way that I live my life. What we did here at BYU with our students was to establish a financial prosperity hierarchy, and it works something like this. How many of you when you first got married or you first moved out of the house or something like that, got to the end of the day and paid all the bills and went, all right, yeah, like I had enough income to pay all my bills. My wife will tell you that created some very anxious moments when we first got married. Her saying, but I need more. Going, so, okay. The second thing is the second stage is the person that actually starts saving something long-term. And that you'd think that's so simple, but for the most part, there's a vast majority of all of Americans never do that. The vast majority. But the next stage of this process is now investing enough money on an ongoing basis to reach our point of choice. What's the point of choice? We changed the word retirement into point of choice in our classes. And it's become an excellent motivator for a lot of people. Do you just know this? We want to come to a point in time in our life where we have sufficient resources that we can actually live off our unearned income, and it can replace our earned income. So unearned income, things like Social Security income and retirement income and pension income and investment income and maybe a home, maybe a reverse mortgage or something like that kind of income. We want to come to a point in time where we can actually just decide whether we want to keep working or not. And it's a fun time. I highly recommend it for everybody. We'll teach it a lot more about it during the week and how motivating it can be to not only get to the point of choice, but stay there. I don't know, I can't tell you how many clients will call me on the phone still and say, Scott, I just spent $40,000 on teeth veneers. Did you know you can spend $40,000 on veneers for your teeth? Oh, I had when my clients call me, I just spent $40,000 on teeth veneers. It's the hardest thing I could possibly do to say, which tooth? Like really that's stunning to me. I can't imagine that's. Now, if you're a dentist, this is the part where you're going, if I had a tomato, I'd throw it at him right now. Yeah, point of choice. That's his point of choice, that's for sure. But they'll just say this, am I still okay? Am I, I don't know that I thought I was going to spend that much, but I just want to make sure that I'm still okay. That's what the point of choice is all about. So now the third part is actually you're saving enough money. You're saving and investing enough money that you'll finally get to your point of choice. Oh, coolest thing. The next point, would it surprise you if it is when you reach your point of choice? Got to tell you quickly, back in 2001, my wife and I hit our point of choice. We knew what our number was. You all know what your number is. You know what the number was, that kind of thing. No matter where you are in life, you're supposed to have a number. You're supposed to know what it's got to be. So we reached our point of choice. I took her to dinner on the back of a napkin, showed her exactly how it all worked. We were both ecstatic. We'd actually saved up enough that we were at our point of choice. And my wife was ecstatic for about 15 minutes. And she looked at it. She said, Scott, do you think we could double that? And I said, well, yeah, I guess, because, we had made some fairly conservative assumptions when we came up with our first point of choice number. So I said, sure. Well, it took us 3 years to get back to that. And why I doubled it, took her back to the restaurant, showed it to her again. And, it was pretty fun. That's just kind of that kind of conquering hero moment where you can go, we did it, This time she looked at it for about 10 minutes. She said, now can we double it again? But she said, this time, let's double it for others. I thought that was pretty cool. Now, let's just set aside. Let's double it, but let's just set it aside for others that we can work with, angel investing and educational endowments and all sorts of other opportunities where somehow what we've done when it comes to, and I think there's a little bit, I'm going to tell you a little fun story. You've probably all heard it in Luke 19, where the laborer leaves, the nobleman leaves the vineyard. The Lord leaves the vineyard. Gives three guys money, the laborers money. What did he say? I don't know what he actually told them to do with it. But he said he went away for a period of time and he came back and he asked the first one, what'd you do with it? And he said, it's worth 10 times more than when you gave it to me. Oh. See, I got to tell you this. Albert Einstein once said that compounding, y'all know this? Compounding is mankind's greatest discovery. He said it's the eighth wonder of the world. It is just, and I love those quotes and I love compounding. I don't think that laborer was just compounding. Do you? I think he was multiplying. There's a big difference. I'm kind of very much into this thing about how does it take to multiply? Well, what did he say to that laborer? What did he say to him? Did he give him more money? He didn't say that. He said, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant, because thou hast been faithful over a few. I'll make you have you authority, give you authority over 10 cities." I love to tell my students here at BYU, how many would love to have authority over 10 cities? I get, the mayor, the governor, the czar, the king, or whatever it is. Somehow it sounded like the laborer of the vineyard, the Lord of the vineyard wanted to put him in a position where he could multiply on behalf of other people. He could make it so that they somehow could also benefit from his ability. And that's, I think, what my wife was asking that day when she said, can we just do this now? Now that we know how to do it, can we do it for others? And that's what her excitement was. So our last one is when we get into something called generational prosperity. And that's when we start to say, is there some way that the tools that we've utilized for ourselves to enjoy prosperity? And I'll guarantee you that does not mean that we're just going to give them money. I'll show you here in just a second if we get time. What time is this class supposed to be done? 1:25? Oh, crud, we got 15 minutes. I'm good to go. This is the greatest. Kid, I watched my $1 billion choice. I love this. I think you should turn every great choice into $1 million choice. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do it right here. This is an individual who had $200,000 that we pulled out of his 401k. Now, almost every single client I have that we've done this, where we pulled a lot of money out of their 401k, have agreed to do this. I want you to think through it for just a second. So they put a lot out of the 401k. We set it up so that they pay no tax on it, and suddenly it's inside of a donor advised fund. Do you see that? Well, once it's inside of the donor advised fund, somebody said, well, then where do we get the money from to pay our tithing? And the answer is from the donor advised fund. Now, see if you can take this educational leap. Well, that means that you had $20,000 that you were pulling out of what? What were you pulling the money from? Out of your paycheck or out of your income, whatever you go to get your income, so you have all that money that's it. Now, come on, be with me. Go like this if you see what I'm saying. We're going to pull that 20 out of the donor advice fund. Now, that means that there's $20,000 in cash that you've got a choice of what you can do with that $20,000 in cash. You can surely allow it to be morphed into some kind of other expense. Can anybody here tell me how to spend $20,000? My wife went told me, she said something about saving and how much we're saving, that kind of stuff. And then she said, about something about saving enough or something like that. She says, what do we need to spend it? And, I said, all I know is this. I don't know that I need to teach any classes at BYU on how to spend money. I think people that just kind of comes as part of the natural human instinct. You know how to do that. So we're going to teach you how to do something else with it. What would happen if each year with that $20,000, we put that $20,000 right back into the 401k? Now, if you put the $20,000 right back into the 401k, what's going to happen? That qualifies you for another very significant tax deduction, doesn't it? So now you can not just put $20,000 back, you could actually put 26, and it would not change your lifestyle at all if you're in the 30% tax bracket. Don't worry too much about the numbers. Just know this. I'll kind of illustrate that by just saying this. All we did every single year, all we are planning on doing every single year is putting that $20,000 right back into your 401k. You can put up to $30,000. That's the maximum employee elected to throw is $30,000. You can put into your, it's actually 23 until you turn age 50. No, it wouldn't work for you guys. None of you are 50 yet. So, you know, after age 50, then you can put up to $30,000 a year in your 401k. And I meet very few people who are doing the maximum contribution. So you can put $30,000 into yours. If the spouse is working, you could also put $30,000 into there. So there's plenty of room for it. We calculated in this case that the guy saved over $116,000 in taxes. If we then invested that, now whenever you see an investment number go up, you always have to have this thing at the bottom that says this is not it's only used for illustration purposes. But what if he invested that at 8% growth? He'd have an extra $225,000 in his 401k that came there that was not there, would have not been there had he not done that. That's kind of a nice way to make sure that you're fulfilling all of the expectations. So do you see the $1 million choice in it? Now, if you've got all that tax that you saved, is there something you can do with it really smart that'll make it so that it's a blessing that will happen to you over a long period of time? So, you know, there's $1 million choice. You know, find some great ways to. I want to tell you something. We're in the process of writing a book right now. I'm going to introduce it to you by just saying this. Back in 1961, John F. Kennedy stood up and he announced that we're going to the moon. How many people heard that speech? Yeah, I did too. He said in 10 years, and they did not know how they were going to do it. And as soon as they made that speech, they went to NASA, and they picked 6 engineers at NASA, and they gave them the challenge of getting us to the moon. What was the average age of the engineers that they asked to get us to the moon? It's only 26 years old. Isn't that fascinating? They've got a lot of research that's been done. This is really cool. On July the 24th, 1969, when they actually touched down. So they got there before the 10 years was up. When they actually landed in the water at Mission Control. How many of you watched that splashdown? So you remember what it was like. And boy, you just looked at all those guys at Mission Control and you thought, man, there's all these 50, 60-year-old genius, wise men, that kind of stuff. There was a guy who took a card around at Mission Control that day and said, sign it and tell us how old you are. So we've still got that card. The average age, 28. Oh, they relied on young people. We had this thing happen that I'm just going to tell you about, and that was I was on my way to BYU one day, and I had a bunch of and I was listening to Bill O'Reilly on the radio. Anybody here remember that name? And he was just on young people. Man, they spend so much time on their electronic devices. They're irresponsible. They don't respect adults. So I came down and I told my students, I think I was in this room the day that I did. I had all my students in this room, and I said, I'm going to change your assignment today. I'm going to make it so that now your next assignment is you're going to go out and find high quality research that has been done by you know, Gallup or Pew or Harvard or something like that says, what are the millennials of today doing better than the previous generation? How many of you have kind of been noticing that the kids seem to be slacking off a lot? And you kind of go, well, dang it, they're just not doing everything they're supposed to be doing. So I told them I want to kind of set you off on a journey where you're going to find out for yourself, what are we actually doing better than the previous generation? So not just by casual observation, we're actually doing research into this. And we had over 600 students respond to it. And we had 140 different things that the students said they're doing better than the previous generation. And you'd be stunned at some of them. Some of them you'd not believe. Some of them came out like they respect their parents more than the previous generation, than the old baby boomers. They actually listen to their parents more. They actually have better relationships with them. They're more responsible for their money. Did you know that the younger generations today are not spending money like we were? I know that right now you've probably got a kid that you're going, you've never met my son. I'm just telling you, this is the research, and so you can decide for yourself. We're writing a book right now called The Newest Greatest Generation. And y'all remember when Tom Brokaw wrote that book called The Greatest Generation? Even Tom Brokaw has written a bunch of things about how stunned he is with the millennial generation, and the new Gen Z is the kind of the new one, but I don't know what they're going to call the next one. There's even a generation past that. I just want you to know this. In that book, we're going to write number one, the 8 things, the 7 things, excuse me. We got 8 things listed that the young people can do that will make it so that they can enjoy greater prosperity. But then we're going to, oh, excuse that's the, I'm sorry, I have the wrong one on that. This is the one that parents can do. The ones that are in the previous generation to enjoy their prosperity, multiply with, and actually set up partners with their young one. And look at what number 6 is on that. I'll tell you this, the research will show the single greatest legacy that you can ever provide to your children is what? A legacy of sharing, a legacy of looking out for others. And I just want to kind of throw this out as a possibility. Donor advised funds are great when you see how they can be used for tithing. I have a number of clients now that are looking at this donor advised fund concept as a way to establish a true legacy of sharing that they know will really have a deep and important impact on their children. And I'll just tell you this, I'd love to show you the research right now. This shows just what kind of an impact it can have. I'd only want to encourage you that you explore that and make that maybe part of what you're doing through all the, through family foundations, charitable lead trust, charitable remainder trust, or whatever. Just tell you this, for those of you, I've had a lot of people ask me this question. I think we've got 5 minutes, right? I've had a lot of people ask me this question. When you set up these kinds of accounts, we've talked a lot about, and I really did not show you how I believe that there's a lot of ways you can get money outside of your 401k without paying taxes on it. We've shown you one. Now, see, a lot of you have accumulated money inside of a 401k or an IRA, and you're saying, boy, there's a lot of taxes that I have to pay on this right now. Is there any way to not pay tax? Well, certainly we've got one for you right now that will help a lot. But there's a number of other ways. I think I'll just race through these because I got a couple of other slides. But these are all ways you can get money outside of a outside of a 401k or an IRA, not have to pay any taxes on it. And I would just only introduce you to the opportunity of making sure that that's something that you consider very carefully. Can I teach you about one more capital gains tax that's available to a lot of people that are always tickled when I tell them about it? The capital gains taxation in America today is very different. And I want you to show you some things that you can use to make sure that you're saving money. Offsetting gains against losses, capital gains against losses is very helpful. Tax-free exchanges, I can't tell you how many different ways there are of taking real estate that was qualified real estate, commercial real estate, and turning it into something where you can turn it into a personal residence without having to pay any taxes on it by using 1031 exchanges and converting them into personal use, that kind of thing. But here's the one I really want to show you. Donating for charitable contributions. I've got one more to go. And this is the one, maximizing the 0-10% tax bracket. How many of you could tell me right now which tax bracket you're in? I could help you a lot with it this year. If I just told you this, if your taxable income is under $90,000 this year and you're married, now that's taxable income, not your gross income, taxable income. If it's under $90,000, you're in the 12% federal ordinary income tax bracket. What tax bracket are you in if your taxable income is $90,000 or less for capital gains taxes? So if any capital gains that you're reporting, so you say you sell $20,000 in stock and you report a $20,000 gain, how much tax do you have to pay on that if that, along with the other income, is still under $95,000? You pay zero tax. So just know this, and this is one that, so based on the 2023 federal income tax brackets, that's taxable income number line. If you're single, your 12% tax bracket goes up to $44,725. You're married, filing jointly goes almost to $90,000. If any capital gain that you report makes it so that your income is still under those amounts, you pay zero tax. You have to be, each of you each year, especially if your taxable income is in that kind of a range, should be looking at it and making sure that if there are anything that you'd have to pay capital gains tax on, that you're selling it. Because, and I will tell you this, depending on whatever other taxable, income that you have, capital gains are probably for most people a much smaller amount than they thought. I had a gal call me just last week that she wanted to sell $2 million, and she wants to put this $2 million property instead of a donor advice fund, and they'd figured out all these taxes that are going to save and all that kind of stuff. And by the time we did the analysis for her, she wasn't going to save half the tax that she thought she was going to pay. That she thought she was going to save on it. She was very disappointed. And so just make sure that you kind of understand all the different possibilities. So there's our newest, greatest generation. We just talked about that. We're going to talk about more about that when we get to in our thing today. But there's those eight that we just talked about in the humanitarian service and the thing that you can do with those. So I hope that you have the chance to. Okay, now. This is the first time in my life at BYU Education Week I finished with 5 minutes to go. So questions, how's that? I'll ask questions. Question, do you have a question? Okay, so 7 minutes, go. Qualified distribution, so it's being pulled out of a 401k or an IRA. Oh, the RMD, that's the same concept. The same concept. You could distribute it and then still, well, it's one of two different ways. You can actually, from an RMD, you can put that, you can put up to $100,000 of it in a donor advice fund and pay no tax on it at all. So she was just saying this, if you're taking a required minimum distribution, how do you save tax on, how does a donor advice fund save that? After the first $100,000, you can do that and pay no tax on it at all. Goes directly into it and will pay no tax. Just some people don't want to pay. So the same question came out here, like a required distribution. Number one, it's limited to $100,000 each year. That's pretty technical. You come up here and afterwards, because I'm sure that there's more than one person going, whoa, that's going off onto a. So you come up and I'll tell you all about it. Okay, question. We should have talked about that I should have added that to you, and I wish I would have. There's something that's called a qualified charitable distribution. So if you've got an IRA when you turn age 70, or an IRA or a 401k, you can actually make that money and make it directly as a contribution to the charity and pay no tax on it. Not of the 401k. You can't make a qualified charitable contribution out of a 401k. Too technical. Okay, that gets too technical, but I'll just tell you this. It's got to go to an IRA first. So you can't. Your charitable, your 401k provider won't let you do that, but an IRA will. So you got to roll it to the IRA first. Just know that stocks are completely liquid, unless you've got some stock in some kind of a wild. I mean, if it's a stock, a bond, a mutual fund, or anything like that, within a day I can completely liquidate the thing and have all the cash I need to have to put it someplace else. So. Now, see, if you just said something, you said stock, and then you said LLC, and LLCs don't have stock. You see what I'm saying? So you come up afterwards, we'll talk about that so it doesn't get too technical. Whoa, talk about knock that ball. How many people here have an HSA? Can you do an HSA contribution directly to a donor advice fund? No. But you can pull it out and pay the tax on it and then have it contributed to a donor advice fund. So the same thing as a 401k. So, but no, you cannot. So don't, HSA is the same thing as a 401k. One more question right there. Now I'll let you go. You come up, that's one that's so uniquely exclusive to you as an individual. You come up afterwards and we'll back up and you can take that slide if you'd like to. Is that all right? Okay, is that it? I just have to, okay, one more question. Way too complex for our thing, but I can tell you all the details. I'm actually qualified advisor on all of those different, so I can tell you what that is. But one of those types of things takes off in a whole other category of donor advice. I mean, kind of charitable giving, but it can be the deductions and the benefits can be much better than even a donor advice fund. Okay, you're very good. I love you. We're going to work right now on America's financial future. For those of you who, I know there were a lot of people that wanted to stay for that anyway. So that's the next one up. Thank you very much for being here.